The emergency klaxon blared through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Council headquarters, a sound that hadn't been heard since the Great Tentacle Uprising of 2847. In the main chamber, a massive domed room that could house 3,000 beings from across the galaxy, Ambassador Click scuttled nervously across the polished floor on his 6 spindly legs. "Order! Order!" Chancellor Vorp's voice boomed from his floating platform, his gelatinous purple form quivering with authority. Well, mostly authority. There was definitely some fear-jiggling mixed in there. "This emergency session is now in session. Ambassador Clicks, present your terrifying findings." Click's 8 compound eyes darted frantically as he clutched a datapad with 2 of his forearms. The other 2 were busy wringing themselves in anxiety. "Honored Chancellor, distinguished beings of the Council, I regret to inform you that we have received first contact protocols from... He paused dramatically, though it might have been a panic attack. "From species designation Terra 3, also known as... humans." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Several smaller species immediately activated their personal force fields. The Zephyrian delegate actually fainted, which was impressive considering Zephyrians were essentially sentient gas clouds. "Surely you jest," wheezed Councillor Grex, his tentacles turning a worried shade of chartreuse. "The humans are requesting membership? In our peaceful alliance?" "I'm afraid so," Clix continued, his voice climbing an octave with each word. "They've submitted what they call a cultural overview package for our review. I've spent the last 72 hours analyzing their barbaric entertainment media." Chancellor Vorp's eye stalks extended to their full length, a sure sign of distress. "Show us the evidence, Ambassador, though I fear what horrors we might witness." The main holographic display flickered to life, showing a montage that would have made a tourism board weep. There was something called Die Hard, featuring a human single-handedly defeating an entire army. Then came John Wick, where another human eliminated roughly half a city's population over a deceased pet. The display cycled through Rambo, The Avengers, and for some inexplicable reason a 3-hour compilation of something called American Ninja Warrior. "By the 7 moons of Proxima," whispered Security Chief Blacks, his crystalline armor rattling. "They train their civilians in combat obstacle courses for entertainment." "It gets worse," Click squeaked. "They have gladiatorial combat they call mixed martial arts, where beings voluntarily enter cages to battle each other while thousands cheer. And this," he pulled up another file, "they have competitive eating contests, where they consume vast quantities of food in ritualistic displays of dominance." The chamber erupted in panicked chatter. The mollusk delegation immediately began secreting defensive slime. 3 different species started praying to their respective deities. "Silence. Silence," Vorp commanded, though his voice cracked slightly. "There must be some mistake. Surely no species could be this aggressively terrifying and still want to join our peaceful coalition." "I wish that were true, Chancellor," Clix replied mournfully. "But their application specifically states they want to share their culture with us. They even included something called a welcome gift." He shuddered all 6 legs simultaneously. "They're sending a representative." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop. If pins existed in space. Which they didn't, but you get the idea. Wherever Forvor asked, though he clearly didn't want to know the answer. Clix checked his chronometer with a trembling appendage. In approximately 10 minutes. And that's when the real panic began. Exactly 10 minutes later, the massive blast doors of the council chamber hissed open with all the dramatic flair of a summer blockbuster entrance. Security Chief Blacks had positioned himself behind a hastily erected barricade of overturned hover chairs, his plasma rifle charged and ready. Ambassador Clix had retreated to what he considered a safe distance, which was roughly the orbit of the nearest moon. Chancellor Vorp had inflated his defensive bladders to maximum capacity, making him look like a very worried purple balloon. And then Jake Martinez walked in. He was, by all accounts, the most aggressively normal human being who had ever existed. 5'9", brown hair that suggested he'd maybe run his fingers through it once that morning, wearing a blue button-down shirt that had clearly come from some sort of bulk retail establishment. In his hands he carried a simple white plate covered with what appeared to be small, brown, circular objects. "Hey there," Jake called out cheerfully, completely oblivious to the 36 alien species cowering behind various pieces of furniture. "Hope I'm not late. Traffic was murder out there." He paused, looking around the chamber. "Wow, this place is incredible. very spacey. I like what you've done with the lighting. Black's rifle was trained directly on Jake's chest. Halt, human warrior. State your weapons and surrender your armaments. Jake blinked. Weapons? Oh, you mean these? He lifted the plate slightly. They're chocolate chip cookies. I made them myself. Well, okay, the recipe was my grandmother's, but I did the actual baking. Turned out pretty good, if I do say so myself. Tactical food preparation. Black's hissed to Clicks. Just as we suspected. Tactical? Jake laughed, a sound that made half the council members dive for additional cover. I guess you could call it that. I did have to fight my oven for about 20 minutes. Things been acting up since the warranty expired. He took a step forward, and approximately 12 different species activated their emergency beacon protocols simultaneously. Stay back, destroyer of worlds! Chancellor Vorp boomed from behind his protective force field. We know of your species' violent tendencies. Your entertainment media has revealed your true nature. Jake stopped walking and tilted his head like a confused golden retriever. Entertainment media? Oh, you mean like Netflix? Yeah, we do love our action movies, though personally I'm more of a romantic comedy guy. You know, something light after a long day at the office. He gestured with his free hand. I'm in accounting, by the way. Really exciting stuff. Spreadsheets, tax codes, the occasional audit. Living the dream. Accounting, Kix whispered in horror. He's their number keeper, their resource allocation specialist, clearly a high-ranking military strategist. Oh, well, I wouldn't say high-ranking, Jake replied modestly, completely missing the terrified undertones. I mean, I did get Employee of the Month last year, but that was mostly because I brought donuts to the quarterly meeting. He lifted the plate again. Speaking of which, would anyone like a cookie? They're still warm. The chamber fell so silent you could have heard a quantum particle sneeze. Jake looked around at the assembled aliens, all of whom were staring at him like he'd just offered to juggle live grenades. No takers? More for me, I guess. He shrugged and took a bite of one of the cookies, chewing thoughtfully. Though honestly, I think I might have added a little too much vanilla extract. What do you think about the weather in this sector, by the way? The trip over was pretty smooth, but I heard there might be some solar storms coming through next week. Solar storms, Blax muttered grimly. He's already planning his next assault vector. Chancellor Vorp decided it was time to take control of the situation before this human warrior could unleash whatever devastating psychological warfare he was clearly preparing. The Chancellor's voice projection system crackled to life, amplified to what he hoped was an appropriately intimidating volume. Human Jake Martinez of the species Terra 3, Vorp announced formally. You stand before the Galactic Council under suspicion of harboring aggressive intentions toward our peaceful alliance. We demand to know your true purpose here. Jake nearly choked on his cookie. Aggressive intentions? Me? He laughed again, causing Ambassador Clicks to scuttle behind a structural support beam. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I'm just here because my boss said someone needed to represent Earth at this whole space thing. I volunteered because, honestly, it sounded like a nice break from tax season. Tax season, Clicks whispered to Blax. A period of systematic resource extraction from his own population. Clearly a rehearsal for galactic conquest. Your deceptive casual demeanor does not fool us, Vorp continued, his gelatinous form wobbling with righteous indignation. We have studied your species' cultural documentation. We know of your violent rituals and combat training. Combat training? Jake scratched his head, leaving a small crumb in his hair. Oh, you mean like gym class? Yeah, I was never very good at that. I got picked last for dodgeball pretty much every time. Actually gave me a complex that lasted well into college. Dodgeball, Security Chief Blax noted grimly into his tactical recorder. Advanced projectile evasion training from childhood. Ruthlessly efficient. Jake was starting to look genuinely confused now, which somehow made him appear even more dangerous to the assembled council. Look, I'm really not sure what you guys are talking about. I brought cookies as a peace offering. Isn't that what you're supposed to do when you meet new people? My mom always said you should never show up empty-handed. Your maternal unit trained you in infiltration protocols, Clicks observed from his hiding spot. Fascinating. They begin the conditioning process from birth. Conditioning? Jake's eyebrows shot up. My mom mostly just taught me to say please and thank you and to always wear clean underwear in case I ended up in the hospital, though I guess that last part is just good general advice for space travel too. He gestured around the chamber. Speaking of which, do you guys have hospitals out here? Because I have to admit, some of you look pretty exotic biologically speaking. Not in a bad way, he added quickly. Just, different, diverse, it's cool. The mollusk delegation began secreting even more defensive slime at being called exotic. Tell us about your species' battle cries, Vorp demanded. We have evidence of humans declaring they will kill it in various scenarios. Jake brightened considerably. Oh, you mean like when someone absolutely nails a presentation at work? Yeah, we do say that. Like last month, my coworker Karen totally killed it during the quarterly budget review, got a standing ovation from the entire accounting department. Well, okay, it was just 3 people, but still, we were impressed. Standing ovation, Blacks muttered darkly. A ritual display of dominance hierarchy. And what of your gladiatorial combat sports? Vorp pressed on. These mixed martial arts where your warriors battle in cages while crowds cheer for blood? Oh, MMA? Jake's face lit up. Yeah, I watch that sometimes, though I usually fall asleep during the boring parts. Too much grappling, not enough action. I prefer the old Jackie Chan movies personally. That guy's got some serious moves, and nobody really gets hurt. It's all choreographed, you know? Like a really violent dance. Choreographed violence, Click squeaked in terror. They've turned warfare into an art form. Jake was really starting to worry about these guys now. They seemed nice enough, but clearly something had gotten lost in translation. Maybe it was a cultural thing. Look, I'm getting the feeling that maybe you've got the wrong impression about humans. We're really not that scary. Most of us just want to go to work, pay our bills, maybe catch a good movie on the weekend. I personally spend most of my free time playing video games and trying to keep my houseplants alive. He paused thoughtfully, though I'm pretty terrible at both, to be honest. Video games, Blacks noted with grim satisfaction. Combat simulation training. And plant cultivation, Clicks added. Clearly biological warfare research. Jake stared at them for a long moment, cookie halfway to his mouth. You know what? I'm starting to think you guys might be overthinking this whole thing. Jake decided that what this situation clearly needed was some good old-fashioned human friendliness. If these aliens were nervous about meeting humans, the best thing to do was show them how normal and harmless Earth culture really was. He reached into his jacket pocket, causing approximately half the council to immediately activate their emergency teleportation protocols. Hey, don't panic, Jake said cheerfully, pulling out his smartphone. I just thought you might like to see some pictures from home. You know, get a better sense of what we're all about. He swiped through his photo gallery with the casual confidence of a man who had no idea he was about to accidentally declare war on 3 star systems. Behold, he announced, holding up the screen toward the cowering masses. This is my dog, Buster. The high-resolution image showed a golden retriever sitting in a park, tongue lolling out, looking about as threatening as a stuffed animal that had been specifically designed to lower blood pressure. But to the assembled aliens, who had spent the last several hours reviewing humanity's most violent entertainment, the sight of a creature with visible fangs and predatory eyes was absolutely terrifying. Sweet merciful cosmos, whispered Counselor Grex, his tentacles now a vibrant shade of terror cellar. They've domesticated apex predators. Look at those teeth, Blacks muttered, zooming in on the image with his tactical scanner. And those alert ears, clearly designed for hunting. This is obviously a war beast. Jake beamed with pride. Isn't he great? I rescued him from the shelter 3 years ago. He was the sweetest thing, just sitting there wagging his tail, looking all sad and hopeful. Cost me about $50 in adoption fees, but it was totally worth it. He's the best hiking buddy I've ever had. Hiking, Ambassador Clicks noted with growing horror. Long-distance reconnaissance missions with his trained assault creature? We go up to Mount Wilson most weekends, Jake continued enthusiastically, swiping to the next photo. Here's a picture of him after we completed the 8-mile trail. Look how happy he is. The image showed Buster panting heavily, covered in dirt, with what appeared to be dried saliva around his mouth. To the aliens, it looked like a battle-hardened veteran returning from a successful hunt. The creature appears to be covered in the remains of its victims, Vorp observed, with a shudder that rippled through his entire gelatinous mass. Oh, that's just mud, Jake laughed. He loves to roll around in puddles. Drives me crazy because then I have to give him a bath, and let me tell you, trying to get a 70-pound dog into a bathtub is like wrestling a furry wet tornado. Bathing rituals, Blacks whispered. Probably some kind of purification ceremony after combat. Jake swiped to the next photo, completely oblivious to the fact that he was single-handedly causing the greatest diplomatic crisis in galactic history. And this is my grandmother's garden. She's 83 and still grows the most amazing tomatoes you've ever seen. The image showed a neat, organized plot of land with rows of carefully tended plants, a small greenhouse, and what appeared to be a complex irrigation system. To beings who had never seen agriculture practiced on a small scale, it looked like a sophisticated biological research facility. Genetic modification laboratory, Click squeaked, his 8 eyes focusing on the greenhouse structure. Look at the controlled environment chambers. She's been working on this hybrid variety that's supposed to be extra resistant to pests, Jake continued proudly. Took her about 5 years to get the crossbreeding just right. The neighbors are always asking for her secret recipe. Crossbreeding, Counselor Grex repeated in horror. Secret recipes. They're developing biological weapons in residential areas. Oh, and here's my favorite, Jake said, swiping again. This is from the county fair last month. I actually won first place in the amateur baking competition. The photo showed Jake standing behind a table laden with pies, cakes, and various baked goods, holding a blue ribbon and grinning broadly. Behind him, a crowd of humans could be seen eating, laughing, and generally having a good time. But to the Galactic Council, it looked like a military commander displaying the results of his tactical food preparation program while his troops celebrated a successful mission. Mass food production, Blacks noted grimly. Look at the efficiency of the operation, and the crowd appears to be in some kind of victory celebration. The human appears to have achieved a leadership position in this baking division, Vorp observed. Note the ceremonial blue marking he displays as a symbol of rank. Jake was starting to get a little frustrated. These aliens seemed nice enough, but they were completely missing the point of everything he was trying to show them. Look guys, I'm really not sure what you're so worried about. This is just normal everyday stuff. People walking their dogs, growing vegetables, baking pies for the county fair. It's about as peaceful and boring as it gets. Boring, Clicks repeated slowly. A deceptive term designed to lower our guard. And he describes it as peaceful, Blacks added, while simultaneously showing us evidence of biological warfare research and tactical food production capabilities. Jake stared at them for a moment, then looked down at his phone, then back at the aliens. You know what? I'm starting to think maybe we should start over. Hi, I'm Jake Martinez. I work in accounting. I like long walks with my dog, and I bake cookies as a hobby. I'm here because my planet wants to be friends with your planets. The cookies are a gift. He held up the plate again. Would anyone like to try one? The silence that followed was so profound that it seemed to have its own gravitational field. Jake stood there, plate extended, looking increasingly confused and slightly hurt that no one seemed interested in his grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe. Finally, Chancellor Vorp spoke. Human Jake Martinez, your psychological warfare techniques are more sophisticated than we anticipated. Jake's eye twitched slightly. Psychological warfare? I brought cookies. And that's when Jake Martinez, mild-mannered accountant from suburban Denver, finally reached his limit. Not in a violent, world-conquering way that the Galactic Council expected, but in the particularly human way of someone who had spent 45 minutes trying to be polite to people who kept calling his grandmother's garden a weapons laboratory. Okay, you know what? Jake said, his voice rising just slightly above his previous conversational tone. I have had it. I took 3 personal days off work for this. 3 days. Do you know how many spreadsheets are piling up on my desk right now? I've got quarterly reports due next week. The Yamamoto account is breathing down my neck about their tax projections, and my boss specifically told me not to screw this up because it could be really important for humanity's future. The aliens watched in fascination as Jake began gesturing more emphatically with his free hand, the plate of cookies wobbling dangerously in the other. So I spent my entire weekend baking these cookies. Not just any cookies, mind you, but my grandmother's secret recipe. The one she only makes for Christmas and special occasions. I had to call her 3 times to make sure I got the measurements right. 3 times. You know what that means? That means I had to listen to her tell me about her neighbor Mrs. Patterson's hip replacement surgery 3 separate times. Ambassador Clicks was furiously taking notes on what he assumed was a detailed breakdown of human military logistics. I used real vanilla extract, not the fake stuff, the real stuff that costs like $12 for a tiny bottle. I used organic flour because I read somewhere that it makes a difference, even though I'm pretty sure that's just marketing nonsense. I even bought those fancy chocolate chips, the ones that are supposedly ethically sourced, whatever that means. Jake was pacing now, which caused Security Chief Blacks to track him with his weapon, but Jake was too worked up to notice. And then I get here and you people, he gestured broadly at the assembled council, keep acting like I'm some kind of space Hitler just because humans happen to enjoy action movies and competitive sports. Newsflash, everybody likes action movies. They're fun. They're not a documentary about our secret plans for galactic domination. Chancellor Vorp's eye stalks followed Jake's movement like he was watching a particularly unpredictable tennis match. I mean, what's next? Are you going to tell me that our cooking shows are evidence of chemical warfare research? That our dance competitions are actually combat training? That our reality TV shows are… Jake paused mid-rant. Actually, you know what? Our reality TV shows probably are some kind of psychological warfare, but that's beside the point. And then it happened. In his mounting frustration, Jake's gesturing became a little too enthusiastic. The plate tilted at just the wrong angle, and gravity did what gravity does best. The entire batch of cookies went flying through the air in a perfect arc, scattering across the polished floor of the council chamber like delicious shrapnel. "Oh, crap," Jake muttered, watching his grandmother's cookies skitter across the floor. "I am so sorry. I didn't mean to. Oh man, my boss is going to kill me." The council chamber fell silent except for the gentle sound of cookies rolling to a stop. Jake stood there, holding an empty plate, looking more dejected than any potential galactic conqueror had a right to look. 3 days, he said quietly to himself. I took 3 days off work for this. One particularly well-baked cookie rolled across the polished floor and came to rest directly at Ambassador Clix's feet. The insectoid stared down at it, his 8 compound eyes reflecting the chamber's crystalline lighting. It was perfectly golden brown, with chocolate chips distributed in what could only be described as an aesthetically pleasing pattern. A small wisp of residual steam rose from it, carrying with it the unmistakable aroma of butter, vanilla, and sugar. For a moment, nobody moved. Jake looked mortified, the council looked terrified, and Clix looked curious. "Ambassador," Security Chief Blacks warned in a low voice, "do not engage with the tactical baked goods." But something about the situation had shifted. Maybe it was Jake's obvious embarrassment, or his completely unglamorous breakdown, or the fact that he was now muttering apologies while trying to pick cookies up off the floor like some kind of world's least threatening janitor. Or maybe it was just the smell. Because here's the thing about chocolate chip cookies fresh from the oven. They smell like childhood and comfort and home, regardless of what planet you're from. They smell like someone cared enough to spend time creating something just to make other people happy. They smell, in other words, like the exact opposite of a weapon. Clix looked around nervously, then down at the cookie again. His fellow council members were watching him with expressions ranging from concern to outright horror. But Jake wasn't paying attention anymore. He was on his hands and knees, gathering up cookies and apologizing to himself about ruining humanity's first contact. And in that moment of perfect, ridiculous human vulnerability, Ambassador Clix made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He picked up the cookie. "Ambassador, no!" Chancellor Vorp cried out, but it was too late. Clix took the tiniest possible nibble, barely more than a few molecules worth of cookie. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his 8 eyes began to widen simultaneously, creating an effect not unlike a biological kaleidoscope of wonder. "Oh," he whispered. "Oh my." The combination of butter and sugar hit his taste receptors like a symphony written specifically for his species. The vanilla added a complexity he had never experienced. The chocolate chips provided little bursts of rich, bitter contrast that somehow made the sweetness even sweeter. It was, in short, the most delicious thing he had ever tasted in his entire 70-year lifespan. "What is it?" Counselor Grex called out nervously. "Ambassador, report your status." Clix took another slightly larger bite. His entire exoskeleton began to shimmer with what those familiar with his species would recognize as pure, unadulterated joy. He paused, searching for the right words in galactic standard. "It's wonderful." Word traveled fast in the council chamber, not through any official communication channels, mind you, but through the ancient and powerful medium of curiosity overcoming fear. Counselor Grex was the next to succumb, his chartreuse tentacles delicately picking up a cookie fragment that had landed near his hover platform. If Clix is still alive after 30 seconds, he reasoned to himself, it cannot be immediately lethal. The cookie piece was small enough that he could analyze it with his natural chemical sensors before consuming it. What he detected was butterfat, processed grain proteins, crystallized sucrose, and something his database identified as cacao derivatives. Nothing toxic, nothing artificial, nothing that registered as remotely dangerous. Just food. Really, really good-smelling food. He took a cautious bite, and his tentacles immediately began changing colors in rapid succession, cycling through the entire emotional spectrum of his species. Purple for surprise, blue for contemplation, green for appreciation, and finally settling on a warm golden yellow that roughly translated to deep satisfaction. "By the ancient spawning grounds," he whispered. "This is extraordinary." Security Chief Blacks watched in horror as 2 of his most trusted colleagues appeared to succumb to human mind control substances. But then he noticed something peculiar. Neither Clix nor Grex showed any signs of aggression, confusion, or altered mental states. Instead, they both looked happy. Genuinely, simply happy, in a way he hadn't seen from either of them in years. Against every protocol in his extensive military training, Blax lowered his weapon. Meanwhile, Jake had managed to collect most of the scattered cookies back onto his plate, muttering apologetically to each one as if they were individual beings he had personally wronged. "Sorry, little guy, sorry about that. Oh, you got some floor dust on you? That's not good." He was so absorbed in his cleanup mission that he completely missed the quiet revolution happening around him. Chancellor Vorp, observing the situation from his elevated platform, found himself facing the most challenging decision of his political career. On one appendage, his advisors and security protocols demanded he treat this as a potential contamination event. On the other appendage, two of his most trusted council members appeared to be experiencing something that could only be described as bliss. "Ambassador Clix," he called out officially, "please provide a detailed status report on your condition." Clix looked up from his cookie, crumbs scattered across his mandibles, his 8 eyes sparkling with an emotion that the universal translator struggled to classify, before settling on pure contentment. "Chancellor," he began, his voice carrying none of its usual anxiety, "I believe we may have made a significant error in our assessment of human intentions." "How so?" Vorp asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "Peas cookies, as the human Jake calls them. They are not weapons. They are..." Clix paused, taking another small bite. "They are gifts. Pure gifts. Created with time and care and skill, designed for no purpose other than to bring joy to others." The concept was so foreign to the Council's understanding of interspecies relations that several members needed their universal translators to run the phrase through their databases twice. "But surely," Vorp protested, though with less conviction than before, "there must be some strategic advantage, some hidden purpose." Jake looked up from his cookie-gathering mission, having finally noticed that the room had gotten significantly less terrified and significantly more interested. "Strategic advantage? I mean, I guess they're pretty good for dunking in milk, and they make people happy, which is nice. My coworkers always get excited when I bring them to the office." He stood up, plate once again full of slightly dusty but still delicious cookies, "though I have to say you guys have really nice floors. Very clean. 5-second rule definitely applies here." 5-second rule? Chancellor Vorp inquired. "Oh, if food falls on the floor but you pick it up within 5 seconds, it's still safe to eat? It's not exactly scientific, but it's like a universal human principle." Jake shrugged. "My mom taught me that one too." "Your maternal unit has extensive knowledge of food safety protocols," Blax observed, though he was beginning to sound less like a security chief and more like someone who was genuinely curious about human culture. "I mean, she raised 4 kids and nobody died of food poisoning, so I guess she knew what she was doing," Jake replied. "Though she did make us eat our vegetables, which at the time felt like cruel and unusual punishment." By now, word of the cookie phenomenon had spread to the outer rings of the council chamber. Species that had never agreed on anything were forming small, nervous groups around the scattered cookies, engaging in hushed debates about the implications of voluntary flavor-based pleasure. The crystalline collective, who typically communicated only through harmonic frequencies, managed to modulate a tone that roughly translated to cautious optimism about confectionery diplomacy. The Aquatic Federation, represented by beings who existed primarily in mobile water tanks, were deeply concerned about the logistics of consuming land-based baked goods, but were attempting to create a solution involving selective filtration systems. Even the notoriously skeptical Synthetic Intelligence Alliance had dispatched micro-drones to conduct molecular analysis of the cookies, though their preliminary reports kept coming back with results that essentially boiled down to surprisingly excellent. Jake, oblivious to the diplomatic revolution he had accidentally triggered, was now offering cookies directly to anyone brave enough to approach. "Here, try this one. It's got a really good chocolate-to-dough ratio. Oh, and this one's slightly underbaked in the middle, which some people prefer. More chewy. Chancellor Vorp found himself floating down from his elevated platform for the first time in his 3-decade political career. The implications of this action were not lost on anyone in the chamber. The Chancellor approaching a foreign representative at ground level was essentially a formal acknowledgement of equal status. "Human Jake Martinez," Vorp said formally, his voice carrying across the chamber through the official announcement system. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I wish to extend an apology for our initial misunderstanding of your intentions." Jake looked genuinely confused. Apology? For what? I mean, I'm the one who dropped cookies all over your floor. If anything, I should be apologizing to you, and also probably to your janitorial staff. Do you guys have janitorial staff? Because I feel like I should leave a tip or something. Your concern for our maintenance personnel is noted and appreciated, Vorp replied solemnly. However, I believe we may have approached this first contact scenario with certain preconceptions that have proven to be entirely incorrect. Oh, Jake said, the pieces finally starting to fall into place. You thought we were going to try to take over your galaxy or something, didn't you? The silence that followed was answer enough. Jake started laughing, not the nervous laughter of someone trying to diffuse tension, but the genuine, deep laughter of someone who has just realized the cosmic absurdity of their situation. You thought Earth sent an accountant to conquer the galaxy? With cookies? He laughed harder. I can't even conquer my own inbox, and I've been working on that for 3 years. And somehow, the laughter was contagious. It started with Ambassador Clicks, whose species version of laughter sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Then Councillor Grex joined in, with a sound like bubbling water. Soon the entire chamber was filled with the sounds of 36 different species discovering that laughter, like cookies, was apparently a universal language. 6 months later, Jake Martinez found himself sitting in what had once been the Council's emergency session chamber, but which now served as the Galactic Council's official cultural exchange and diplomatic refreshment center. He was wearing a formal diplomatic sash that he still wasn't entirely sure he deserved, and in front of him sat the largest order of cookies he had ever been asked to fulfill. So, let me get this straight, he said, reading from his official tablet while trying not to get powdered sugar on the screen. The Crystalline Collective wants 36 of the snickerdoodles, but they need them to be exactly 3.7 centimeters in diameter for optimal harmonic resonance during consumption. The Aquatic Federation wants chocolate chip, but they need them to be water-soluble, which I'm pretty sure defeats the entire purpose of cookies. And the Synthetic Intelligence Alliance wants me to create a cookie that can be appreciated through electromagnetic spectrum analysis alone, which I don't even know how to begin approaching. Ambassador Clicks, who had become Jake's unofficial liaison to the Council, nodded enthusiastically. The vegans of Proxima 7 also requested that you develop a cookie that can photosynthesize its own flavor compounds, though I told them that might be beyond current human baking technology. You know, Jake said, leaning back in his chair, when I volunteered for this job, I thought the hardest part would be figuring out how to explain tax law to aliens. I never imagined I'd be running the galaxy's first interspecies bakery. And yet, Clicks observed, delicately consuming what had become his daily afternoon cookie, your baking has accomplished what centuries of diplomatic protocols could not. You have created the first truly unified galactic initiative. Jake looked out through the chamber's massive viewing window at the dozens of ships from different worlds, all docked at the station, all here for what the official records now called cultural exchange meetings, but what everyone actually knew were Cookie Tuesdays. You know what the funny thing is, Jake said, taking a bite of his own cookie. I still don't really understand what happened here. I brought cookies to a meeting, and now I'm apparently the galaxy's first interspecies morale enhancement specialist, whatever that means. It means, Klex replied, his translation device giving his words a warm, almost paternal tone, that you reminded us all of something we had forgotten in our rush to build bigger governments and more complex treaties. Sometimes the most important diplomatic tool is simply wanting to make others happy. Jake nodded thoughtfully, then checked his watch. Speaking of which, I should probably get started on tomorrow's batch. The Tentacle Coalition specifically requested double chocolate chip, and those guys tip really well in rare minerals. As he stood up to head to what had once been a strategic planning room but was now a fully equipped industrial kitchen, Jake paused at the door. Hey, Clicks. Yes, Ambassador Jake? Do you think my grandmother would be proud? Ambassador Click's 8 eyes focused on his friend, the being who had accidentally become the most important diplomat in galactic history, simply by being kind. Jake, he said softly, I think your grandmother would be very proud indeed. And somewhere in suburban Denver, an 83-year-old woman was telling her neighbor about how her grandson had gotten that nice job in government service, though she still wasn't entirely clear on what exactly he did for work. Something with international relations, she thought. He always was such a thoughtful boy. The cookies, she was quite certain, were still the best part.